Here we are. So, last session today, I would like to start as in the previous sessions, mm, talking about what we have done so far, and basically, we covered everything, almost everything. And we covered the preparation of the audit, we covered the actual core activities for the audit, and also we cover some post-audit activities in a very light way. However, I want to today we'll be focusing a little bit more on this, and yeah, basically that's it. Um, so again, this is not the first time I'm showing this. We'll skip all the animations and again reinforce the idea that my and also the opinion of some other people in the community doing SAFETAG assessments, we suggest strongly that we treat the data that we capture in these three buckets. Okay, at the beginning of the audit, the threats, things that can go wrong for the organization. Then during all the week, 3 days or months, we'll be gathering vulnerabilities. And after that, we will sit with all of the vulnerabilities and we will draft some recommendations. Okay. So yeah, again, this content. So awesome. We did everything. Um, we did everything. Let me solve the screen situation. Um, yeah, excellent. So now we are ready to draft a report with all of the recommendations. Um, awesome. Um, First, it's very important to know what we want to achieve with the report, with the actual report. There may be different issues with this. As always, do you have here and you will have in the slides the actual links to the SafeTag activity and method and activity. Um, and basically, in a very rough way, we want to include in our report everything we might want or need to share with the organization. That won't be the same every time. Um, and yeah, basically, we need to understand the nuances and the differences between two different organizations and two different audit processes. And these are some of the guiding questions that will shape the way we are building our reports. First question, who is going to read the report? It will be the executive director, it would be some operation manager or something like that. It would be an IT department. So depending on which people will be reading, we might be drafting it in different ways. Okay, the technical level. Sometimes a couple of times we made audits to organizations working on internet freedom issues. Sometimes these organizations are very technical, or they understand some of the language on the jargon of the vulnerabilities. So we might share with them more straightforward information. But if we are working with an organization that is not that familiar with technical terms, etc., we might need to build maybe a bigger thing where we are explaining in a more basic way some of the concepts behind the vulnerabilities and recommendations. Um, Also, more than one kind of audience. There is a an idea that in some cases we want to draft more than one report, okay, because a very recurring example is when we are talking with executive directors or the operation managers, but also the organization has an IT department. So sometimes they will ask you to, can you give me the whole thing, the whole report? But can you prepare a smaller report that I only with the things that IT should be worried about? And maybe we can do that, or maybe not. It depends on a lot of things. But sometimes it will make sense to have different versions of the report. Um, if the organization have enough time to read something super big, I will show you something very big later. and sometimes it might be counterproductive because sometimes the organization is so drowned in their own work that in top of that, adding I don't know, a 50 pages like report would be a lot. So that's also a factor. If we will be available to solve questions is also important. Sometimes we are auditing organizations that they're friends and we know them. They can reach out to us on Signal or whatever other quick way, and that's fine. But sometimes we are auditing an organization that is in another region that and we don't talk that much, or maybe the communication channels are not that immediate. Maybe we are communicating with them on through email or through other means. So that will also affect how big or small or comprehensive is our report. If I'm auditing an organization that I know and I talk with them very frequently, maybe I can do a smaller thing because if they have any doubts, they can just reach out and I can help them with that. And also if they have specific requirements. In a couple of cases, the organization told me, or yeah, that they wanted that report only on a specific asset, only for the website, only for our internal server, only for policy, security policy related things. And well, that's another factor to consider. Right. So then we know I'm going basically I'm setting the scene to talk about different kinds of reports depending on our needs. So also we would need to understand our goals for that specific audit and that specific report. And the most important thing is what it will be useful for. So in most cases, we want the organization just to implement the recommendations that we are proposing. In some other cases, and this happens a lot, it's not like an exception. Many organizations, they want that report because they can go to their funders and ask for more money to implement some of these things that might cost some extra money. And also, in some cases, they want these reports to share with other people. For instance, companies. Some organizations they outsource their IT services. They don't have in-house IT people, but they hire a company that comes once in a month to review computers, etc. So they want something that they can hand to them so they can do their thing. So that we need to be very aware of if one or multiple of these options are okay on each audit, or maybe more options. Um, and also another goal of the report is that the recommendations are pertinent. We need the organization or whoever is going to implement these recommendations to understand what are we talking about. And also we need that the recommendations are possible, that are feasible to implement. So please, if the organization is struggling with funds, like the story of any organization, basically, please avoid proposing things that are too expensive or things like that. Okay, just to give that example, or things that requires a lot of in-house technical expertise they don't have, or things that are not applicable in their geography. I remember, for instance, in some countries in Latin America, it's very difficult to have advanced equipment. And for instance, in many evaluations I have seen in reports that they are asking organizations to have YubiKeys or other specialized security equipment that is just impossible to get in country, or at least impossible in an easy way. We need to do a lot of things to make that happen. So that's also related to this pertinence on the recommendations. Okay. But above everything, like the most important thing of the report is that somebody will read it, because trust me, if we do something too comprehensive or too overwhelming or too long, probably nobody would read it, and that will affect a lot the final goal of this whole process, that is the organization improving their security. And probably It would feel something like this. Okay, you give them the report, they just ignore it, and it's the same that you did nothing basically. Yeah, so there are, I'm gonna walk you through different report types. This is coming from a blog post that I'm gonna share with you when I'm sharing the references and the slides and the recording for this session. However, I would like to stop one by one here to let you know about these types, these kinds of reports. Okay. The first one is the easiest one, the recipe report. This is something like you just list very briefly some things that the organization should be doing. Okay, and here you say literally like you should do this, this, and this. Don't question it, just do it. Good or pros is that it's straight to the point. It might be one page, it might be 2 pages long. Yeah, usually you describe very briefly the actions that you want to recommend, usually very short, and it's very good for those organizations that already know the technical parts of it. If I handle a report like this one and I tell the organization, you know what, you need to um, disable TLS protocol in your website version 1.0 and 1.1. If they understand what I'm talking about, yeah, it works. Okay. However, now here we're seeing some pitfalls because if the organization they don't understand all the jargon, they don't know what to do. And for me, the most important thing, they won't know why they need to do this, and that will be a problem because it might be a very tied to a very important vulnerability, and they will know because they don't know what are we talking about in the first place. Um, so yeah, it's not that good when the recommendations are not self-explanatory enough, and that's very tight with one our capacity to redact in short sentences like our recommendations, and two their technical familiarity on the topics that we are covering in our recommendations. Okay, so that's the first one, very easy, 1 2 pages, no problems with that. There is another, or the next one, the asset-oriented report. Sometimes they will have um, a server, a computer, mobile phones, photo cameras, etc. So we can organize the information in our report that is responding to all of those assets. So this is kind of the example. You have one computer, okay, then you have one problem and this other problem, and we recommend for that computer this solution and this tool. But also you have a website with this other problem, and for that website, we recommend doing this and this. So it's very easy to the storytelling of this. Okay, is easy to communicate, and the organization will allocate better their human resources, especially to solve the things they feel are more pressing. Okay, it's easier for them to prioritize on their side what they want to address. Maybe it's this computer, or maybe it's the website, or maybe it's any other thing. But they will have easier ways to decide that. Also easy to share with third parties, because if I have a consultant that is managing the website, I only take that section and I send that section to this person or to this company or whatever. Okay, so this might make our life easier in those cases when we need to do many reports or different versions of the reports, because with this approach we just build one, and when we have the whole thing we just bring or copy and remove the sections that we don't care about, and we end up with very compartmentalized versions of the report. uh, However, this is not very good for complex, in the downside. uh, part of things, not very good for complex threat models, because in complex threat models, everything usually is very connected. Okay, so it's not like I may have a problem that might affect many assets, many different assets, or maybe I can tell you, you know what, these are your problems with the website, and maybe you want to solve them first. However, if you only do website, you might be overlooking a lot of other things that might have the same bad outcome. So for more complex threat models, is less interesting this format. Um, and there is a very interesting thing about these audits. Sometimes we will have very capable people in technical terms inside the organization. And one of the ways we can ensure some kind of sustainability is that the organization is able to conduct the same assessments by themselves later. So maybe they say, okay, Carlos gave me this report, I'm going to implement these things, and I don't know, in 6 months, I want to see if these problems are solved. I want to see if the things that Carlos did to find these vulnerabilities, if I repeat them, I will find the same things. So if that's the case, and we are only telling them what are the problems, then it's harder for them to understand what I did to reach out to those problems. So if they have IT departments, they have IT people, and they want to repeat this in the future, maybe this approach is not the best. Okay. um yes. um yes. The next form, the kind of report that we have detected on over the time, is the activity-oriented report. So instead of telling people you have one computer and then with this problem and this solution, and you have this server with this problem and this solution, I may say, you know what, I ran this activity, I did these interviews, I ran this tool, this vulnerability scanner on your network, and I found this, and this. And the solutions tied to that are this, and this. The way it's described here. And to be very honest, in a very high level way, is less straightforward to is less easy to communicate, because many activities might be assessing the same resources, so it becomes a little bit confusing at that point. However, this specific kind of report is very, very powerful if they want to repeat the same things you did, because when I say here activity one, I would say I run the tool Nessus against the website in this version, or I can say exactly what kind of scan I did, etc. And I found these problems with these solutions. So it will be easier for them, indeed, if they have IT department or more technical people. It will be easier for them 6 months down the road to repeat these same tests, because they already are seeing in the report how we did it in the first place. And a good thing is faster to write, because usually, as long as I'm in the audit, I will be documenting everything, and it will respond to the chronology of the actual audit. Okay. Um, and like I said, a downside might be confusing, because maybe I will try 4 different tools on the same assets, on the same computers, on the same servers, and they may be a little bit confusing for some people reading the report. Um, and this is also a little bit harder to relate to the actual threats of the organization, because it's so oriented to the technical part. It's saying, you know what, you have a vulnerability in your website, and that's it. But it's not directly tied to, you know what, but thanks to this vulnerability, you might be hacked and you might compromise the information of your sources or your victims, or etc. etc. Because it's more oriented to the actual technical tasks that we started doing. Okay, so this is another way to do it. And finally, of the ones that this article is covering, the super complete report. Okay, you remember that uh, you remember that slide where I was telling you that everything can be modeled as threats, vulnerabilities, and recommendations? It's the same thing. It's based on the same thing. And here we added another layer that is the risk reduction plan. That is basically the treasure map that we give the organization to solve their problems. And that is basically the same recommendations, but ordered in a way that makes sense for them, like short term, medium term, long term, or ordering or also from the most more impactful ones, and so on. So yeah, that's one way to do it. From now, as the word super complete suggests, is could be very, very long. And it's not only to read it, but imagine how long it would be to build it. So that's a problem, no? Or might be a problem, depending on the organization. But a good thing, a really, really good thing, is that it's more self-explanatory. Usually, if you build a very complete report, you send it to the organization and they read it, usually they don't need to get back to you because everything is there. Especially if they don't understand many of the technical things, and you can include the explanations or links or references there, it would be easier for them to first, before reaching out to me asking what this TLS version means, they will find it in the actual report. So that might be a good thing. And another good thing is that given that it's so complete, we have more freedom um, to tie this to our exercises on the threat modeling side and the data assessment exercises. And that's good because we can explain the prioritization uh, of the recommendations in a way that they will instantly understand, because it will be directly tied to what the things they said themselves they care about during our activities. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of the diagram, like the reference on how this works. First, we can tell the organization, you know what, your risk context looks like this, and we can just attach the risk matrix that we built at the beginning of the audit, and we can even describe all of these threats. Threat one, some bad thing happens, and so on. We can just explain all of them. And then we jump to the vulnerability part. During the assessments, we found these vulnerabilities. And we can not only describe the vulnerabilities, but also tie them to the threats. Like, and given that you have this vulnerability, this might trigger threat one and threat 14 and threat the other, no? So they can give a very approachable sense of pertinence to whatever is coming next. Then we can jump to the recommendation side, and we can say, you know what, I recommend you to do these things. Um, and I can say, tell recommendation one, to do this action, and with this action you will be addressing this and this vulnerability, and so on. And maybe we can add this extra layer and say, you know what, I'm not only giving you a long list of things, but I'm telling you that you can execute them in this order. These four recommendations, you can apply them today if you want to, and then you can focus on these ones and these ones, and you can kind of judge in a better way how to implement all this. Yes. Here I will show you something. uh, I I wanted to translate this to English because that way you will understand better. However, it's so long that I decided just to use it in Spanish, and I will tell you like section by section what is going on here, as briefly as I can. This is a redacted. This is a redacted version of what is my biggest report to date. Um, this was a very big organization, around 60 people in Latin America, very complex. They have been victim of a lot of very bad things, and yeah, the threat model is very complex. So that's one of the reasons this report is 78 pages long. Also because it has a cover page. However, I will tell you that I'm showing you this for reference. Okay. Nowadays, this happened like 6 years ago, and today uh, I'm not building 78 page long reports. Okay. Not even half of that. However, I want you to understand like the logic behind all of this. Another a very big index, because every object here is mapped. Everything that says here, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so maybe you can see better. But this is the thread list, and for each thread, I'm adding a number and I'm listing just 46 threats. That was the result of the risk matrix exercise. This is the exception. Usually this is three times as much as we find we map in an organization, but this organization was very intense regarding the detail. Then I put here describe the activities. Then I listed all the vulnerabilities I found during that week-long audit. Again, 27 vulnerabilities. That might be on the high side of things as well. And then I sit down with these 27 vulnerabilities, and I built a list of, wow, 50 recommendations. A lot. Again, this first I showed this to other auditors, and they basically said like, "What? I put 10, and that's a lot," and that's valid. It's perfectly valid. This organization asked me very explicitly. They were very clear that they wanted as much as I could add to this report, as many recommendations as I could, and explain in the best way I can. Like they wanted this to be very self-explanatory, and that's another reason I basically got carried away and did this big report. Great. I started with the scope. I'm telling them what I'm assessing and what I'm not assessing. I told them about SafeTag. This is available in the website. So basically, I copied, translated, and pasted this in the report so they can understand. I described to them. I described to them the the first things, the workflow, the agreement that we signed, and all the remote evaluation things that I did. Um, yes, and yeah, some things I found. Then we did the facilitated activities. So the data assessment activity is here. Basically, we said like they have web page, like physical archives, the bank information, the accounting system, all of that stuff, and we mapped what sensitive information is there, victim data, etc., etc. Um, I see the question if I have an English version of this report. I have something halfway, but I didn't have the time to translate everything. And what I want to do is to build a version of this that is reduced. So I'm not promoting doing a 78 page thing, but that includes some of the information that I want to include. But yeah, this has been, to be very honest, difficult to translate, especially given that I'm not promoting to do exactly this. But I only use this to show the general structure of this very big report, and that's it. This part is important. I today I still incorporate this. when we did the threat matrix, I translated that to this document. For some reason, they decided they wanted the impact scale from 1 to 8, but the likelihood from 1 to 10, and in this direction. I'm just there facilitating, so happy to help them. And all of these A1, A2 are the threats, the actual threats. And here I'm telling them, like, the threat one is a stigmatization of the activity at the public level, uh, lack of storage for backups and stuff like that. Here are even legal things. This is like the judicial system is congested or is overloaded. So the cases, these are an organization working a lot on legal cases, um, and so on. Here we have threats to victims or witnesses. We have leaks of victim information. If they kill the director, if they kill somebody else, everything is here. As I told you, they wanted everything. We did everything, and that's it. So I took these threats, and I started telling them, you know what? This is discovery of the network, and they had like two Wi-Fi networks, whatever. Then they also I did an Nmap, the tool, one of the tools I cover on the self-paced part of this training. And then I even attached the results of that, and so on, user devices, etc. Okay. Social engineering exercises, a lot of things. So after that, I'm explaining them, like, I'm just going to list some vulnerabilities and some recommendations. And these recommendations, again, this is something I'm not doing anymore, but I tagged every single recommendation with and time investment uh, index or value, money investment associated to the recommendation, technical capacity required to implement this, easiness of implementation. Yeah. And then I started listing vulnerabilities. If I have a lot of time, I might do this again. However, it's not common that I'm doing all of this. I'm including all of this detail. But for every vulnerability, I did just a quick box like this one. So I'm telling here, translating, that inside of the website of the organization, I can see information of the PHP installation. This usually is not that big of a problem. However, they will very outdated, so that might be a problem. So I'm telling them that the threat level associated to this is medium. This vulnerability has a code in. Let's see if this is still working, because again, that happened a lot of time ago. Uh-huh. Disclosure. So it's in public databases of vulnerabilities. And also, I'm telling them this is associated. If this doesn't tell anything to you that inside of the organization you are disclosing the PHP information, then I let you know that this is related to this threat, losing information, for instance. And here I describe, and what if you go there here to this domain, you will see the information of installation of PHP, and that might reveal some information that might be used for an attacker to harm the server, basically. Some references. If they click here, they will see an article explaining why this is important or how this works. And also I'm tying this to the respective recommendation, okay, that I made later, and so on. And I'm doing this all the 27 times I did, yeah. So yeah, you will see different colors because basically I'm deciding the threat level of these vulnerabilities. And if this is high, I would put red, and probably if it's low, I will put this Nah, that was again, I'm not doing this a lot recently, but just for you to have an idea. Interesting here, like we might have vulnerabilities that might be associated with a lot of different threats. Okay, so inside of the internal network of the organization, there are many shared folders with information of the organization, and also they didn't have like a password in one of their Wi-Fi networks, so anybody that is in a car and just outside of the office, they could just put a laptop and detect this shared folder and basically download the information, copy information. And that was related to the filtrate, the leaking, the leak of victim data, or this might degenerating threats to victims or witnesses, leak of data on meetings and actors, loss of information, case leak, and also maybe malware that is disabling workstations. I'm just reading. I'm just reading like the associated threats here. Uh, if that's what I'm reading. And again, a description, references, and this vulnerability might be tied to many recommendations. So I have 5 things that I can do to try to mitigate this. Okay, we are getting there in a bit. So and so on. And I can do this. And after all of these vulnerabilities, I'm suggesting things. And again, I did a box. I don't do that a lot. So, for instance, a title for the recommendation, how much time I believe, money, investment, technical capacity, and easiness of implementation. Again, I don't do this anymore, but if you like it, go for it. A description of the recommendation, and if there are references, I put that here. And then the vulnerabilities that are associated with that, and so on. I mean, same thing, no problems with that. Let me scroll a lot so I can skip all of this information. Um, and after all of that, then I gave them a suggested action plan. So this is immediate and short term that can be done by the members of the organization. So that should be the low hanging fruit. And I just link the boxes there in the previous section. Yeah. And so you want to do something now? Okay, implement a SSL certificate in the server managing um, this specific system. Yeah, and here, for instance, I put this in green and I put here done because the IT people helped me to do it during the actual audit. That is responsive support I told you at some moment is this, and then I gave them literally just enabling a guest Wi-Fi network. That's an easy thing that IT can do. Um, Buy more space, disk space to store backups. That's an easy thing they could do because they had enough resources for that. She changed the password of the router. That's an easy and quick thing that you can do. That's also a recommendation, and so on. Then I put here mid term and this list, and then long term measure recommendations that are here. Okay. Um, I really like to not propose a lot of things for the long term because we know how NGOs work. They are rotating staff a lot. Yeah, so it would be hard for them to keep implementing things in the long term if the staff is changing so much. Then I'm here talking good things about their IT department because they are great. The problem is that nobody was listening to them. And next steps. So I gave them like some references of people that they can reach out to in case they have problems, like access security helpline, or they can check the digital first aid kit and stuff like that. And then attachments. Okay. Um, yes. These are like the transcripts of interviews, the results of of some tools, um, the network mapping, all of the IP addresses, and what is each IP address, a router, a computer, a server, a security camera, etc. So yeah, I'm going to uh, annoy you more on this. I see something in the chat. Some vulnerability scanner like Burp Suite or HCL App Scan gives report of the scan pen test results, the vulnerabilities recommendations, etc. When doing the final audit report, it is better to include the app scanner result as it is, or should we adjust it accordingly? That's a very good question. Is in our case also Nessus, that is one that we recommend a lot, does the same thing. And always the recommendation is first try to exclude those things that are not truly relevant. There are many informational like or low warning level things that might be reported by these tools. Each Everybody has their own style, but I would recommend to ignore some of these in case just you know that this is not that important. And for those that are important, I will pretty much leverage the fact that these tools are already putting all of this information in terms of vulnerabilities and recommendations and try to put that into the report. However, I will always review the text. I will review the language, and I will try to make it. I want to try to think if the organization will understand this. If they will, I just copy and paste. If they won't, or I'm not that sure, maybe I can process and reword the wordings or resume, summarize a little bit. It depends on you, but I'm a big fan of putting the information, but in the way I will tell that information. Also, if you have the time. Sometimes I don't have the time and I need to just raise this, and I tell them, like, you know what, if you have any doubts on this, let me know and we can catch up later on a call or whatever. If you want the in plain English, like the explanation of what is this. So yeah, good question. Depending on it depends on the organization. So okay, we have here general observations and lessons learned from the reporting phase of the audits. First, the organizations may take a lot of time to read the report, even if it's a short one, because sometimes they are asking you for an audit because they have an election they need to cover, they have demonstrations, they have some important milestones in their actual work. And when you finish the audit and you give them the report, maybe they are too overwhelmed by their own things that they will take time to read your report, especially, I mean, regardless of how long it is, but especially if it's too long, it would be worse, right? Um, there might be recommendations that they don't get, and that's fine. That's fine. That's a reason they are bringing somebody with some technical expertise, because they will value this perspective. So in many cases, they won't have it. Um, so again and again, multiple audiences. Sometimes the IT person will say, you know what, your report is incredible, it's really good. However, I'm having trouble to implement any of this because my boss doesn't understand why we need to, I don't know, spend $2,000 in something. So we need to be prepared for that as well. And we need to know when not to include something. Same example than before with the question. Sometimes there will be a lot of noise in our tools, in the reports that Nessus or Nmap or whatever other tool we're using, a lot of noise, and we should be um, cautious, but also aware that we might be excluding some information here. Because again, if we give them something that doesn't seem very useful, this is what will happen. Okay, I will briefly go again to the tool that I showed last time. Let's see how well this goes. Yes, demo gods hate me today, but I'm back here in the Kali machine. And this is the tool I showed you last time. This basically helps us to document and the audit process. I already told you last time that we can use these sections to keep documenting everything, and this is the example data. I can have the assets, the activities, and these three objects that I encourage you to document: threats, vulnerabilities, and recommendations. And once I have all of this documented in this tool, I can generate a report. That is pretty much the magic on this. Uh, Basically, here there are many ways to build a report, and these are responding more or less to the four report types that I described earlier. So basically, I can include a list of assets, I can include a list of activities, a list of threats, vulnerabilities, and recommendations. This is not different at all to these options here in the bar up. Okay. However, it is interesting that if, for instance, you know what? I want to generate a version of the report, and I don't want to list any assets. So I just in the left you have things we are not including, and the right things we are indeed including. Um, so yeah, and you know what? I also don't want to report to give details on the activities. I want only to focus on threats, vulnerabilities, recommendations, and that's it. Only these three things. Or even better, they ask me only for website related things because there is a company that is managing the website. So I can remove everything. I can go to the recommendations, and I maybe can bring only the recommendations related to the website. Implement a redirection website. Yeah, I want to do this. And I want to a new email server. Yes. But maybe no, this not. Implement access control and encryption to every computer. That's not the work of our website contractor. This neither. So maybe I can just add a couple of things. And once I have everything here that I want to include in the report, I can export report, and I will have some options here. I'm gonna be honest with this. We're expecting an update to this application because there are a couple of bugs here. However, if you generate a Markdown report or a Microsoft Word report, you will have a good report, a functional report. Maybe it will require some revisions there because some formatting might break. And let me see. I want to believe I can. Yeah, this is an example of of the report. You can add your cover letter however you want to do it, and then you will see just the whatever you documented into this application, and it will structure it in a way that maybe you will try to write more here and there, or maybe remove or add more information, yeah, and ship it. Okay. Vulnerabilities there, you can the titles here of the vulnerabilities, even with the numbers, and also the description, and everything will be there. The activity that was related to that vulnerability, the asset that was evaluated, or yeah, and the related threats. No, it's very cool because it will save you a lot of hours of time if you like this approach. Of course, you can always just fire a Microsoft Word or whatever text editor you like and just go for it, and take some time. Okay, and also the recommendations here. So that's the idea, is that you can use tools like this one to generate reports in an easier way and save a lot of precious time. Okay, super. Again, the link to this tool is in everywhere I'm sharing in the slides, in the website, etc. Okay, now the follow up. Now we did we made the audit, We build the report, we send the report. Now what? No. And with the follow-up, the interesting thing is that it's a new field. It's like a new part of this process that is not very well supported in general in our projects. In general, I'm not even talking about this project in particular, but all of them. Uh, because there are some challenges here. For instance, the project contracts and times. We sometimes we have a very narrowed time frame. So we do the audit, and by the time we want to do the follow up, we are not on contract. The contract ended, or something like that. No, that happens a lot. Just to name one of the many situations around this. So what we want to do during follow-up? Well, first we want to know if the organization could do anything that we recommended. That would be a good start. Then in case the organization might benefit from connecting with other actors, it could be a good moment. Maybe they will say, you know what, you said that maybe we should buy some new phones. I'm making something up. However, we tried, but we don't have the funds to do it. And maybe you can say, you know what? I can refer you to this organization that might help you with that. Because I know they, in the past, they have supported other organizations with new funds that are, and other organizations working the same things that you do. Um, a recurring example, a media outlet, they say, you know what, we discovered that we want a password manager, however, we don't have the funds to do it. And maybe here you say, but you know what, I don't know, this provider, One Password, for instance, they have a program that free of charge, they can onboard you as a media outlet, and you can use their service, their premium service, without paying. So maybe you can try to enable those connections. Yes, that's important. And also, this is for me, this is crucial, understanding any potential implementation challenges. Sometimes we believe we are proposing the right things to organizations, and in the end, we discover that it's not that easy. So if they tell you, Carlos, I couldn't do this, that seems to be very important, but it's impossible. We couldn't do it. Then you can start digging why. I don't know, it's a capacity thing in terms of technical capacity, or capacity in terms of time or money, or something. And then that can help you, one, help the organization to find a workaround or a way to still address the problem. And two, it gives you enough input to improve your next audit, because now you know that a media outlet with these characteristics maybe will struggle as well to implement this thing in my next audit or whatever. And also interesting to know if something changed in terms of the risk landscape. Sometimes you are doing an audit, and 3 months later the country changed, the government changed, their threat changed. Now they are conducting an investigation on organized crime, and now organized crime is based with this organization. It's not just the government, or the opposite. So all of that is interesting to also try to adapt the plans accordingly. And yeah, and well, of course, understand how well we did it. Like what we proposed were the right things. Like they are actually they improve their security or not. That is also something that we should keep an eye on. Um, and that takes me to the evaluation part of this process. I was reminded, I don't know if I'm too old and this reference is too old, but I don't know if you saw The Incredibles, the movie. Basically, we had this character that her job is to design the customs that the superheroes will be using. And she was like, you know what, no capes. You are not using capes, because look what happened to this superhero. And she starts like reminding the characters of these three stories and a couple more, where having the cape ended bad for the hero. So with that learning, they could design better costumes for the heroes. So it's the same. It's pretty much the same. We need to capture information on what we did on the audit, so we can understand if our audit had some cape that can might bring any trouble for us, like down the road in other audits or whatever, and also understand what is making the audit a successful process. Uh, here, this is kind of a mix between a quiz and and me keeping talking, but basically we want to understand something very key in this community. What is making an audit successful? And here, I believe that there are only those options. That the organization improves their security. Okay, that the organization implements the recommendations, that we conduct many activities during the audit, um, that the organization understands better their threat model, or that nothing bad happens to the organization. During the years, we had a lot of projects. At least I was part of many projects that basically try to monitor if the organization improves their security, and that's fine because, well, that's the idea. No, we want to invest some money so we can improve the security of organizations. However, um, the thing with SafeTag as a framework, or the thing about auditing, is that you are not in control of them improving their security. Okay, so uh, maybe that's a goal, but that's not the right marker to know if the audit was successful or not. Okay, maybe you did the best audit in the world, and the organization did nothing about it. Okay, they didn't hear your recommendations, etc. The second one, that the organization implements the recommendations. Same than before. Of course, they will improve their security if they implement your recommendations. If we did a good job. However, again, this is not under our control. Okay, that the organization implements the recommendations is on them, not on you. Okay. Also, that we conduct many activities. I'm less fan of this one because we might conduct many bad activities. We can do a lot of things that are completely irrelevant. I have seen a lot of good, very, very good audits with 2 or 3 activities, no more than that, and with very cool recommendations, and that's fine. So I won't be also that much of a fan of this. That the organization understands better the threat model. I'm more fan of this one because we, as auditors, we have an opportunity to tell the organization how is their security, how good they are, how bad they are, where are the problems. Um, so that's important as well. That nothing bad happens to the organization. And I would love that. I would love to see that, but that's not up to me. Sometimes our adversaries are very powerful people. And I believe that's the last one, that the organization has an action plan to improve their security. I also like this one a lot because that's in my control as an auditor. As an auditor, it's my responsibility to create that treasure map, to create that recipe, to create that list of things they can do to improve their security. So, in an evaluation point of view, I will say that it's like this. Okay, if I want to make a survey, if I want to make a focus group, if I want to make whatever instrument I want to design to try to assess how good was the audit, I will focus on these 2 things in green. Okay, um, that the organization after the audit they understand better their threat model, and that the organization has an action plan. That's what is under my control. If I can include in my surveys the rest of the things, that's fine. That's very fine. However, if the results are good or not, are less tied to the things that are in control of the auditor. So that's something important. If you are starting to work on doing assessments, with this project and or with any other project, please keep in mind that if your funder is asking you or is evaluating you for something that is here in orange, maybe you need to know that it probably is not the right or not the best um, way to measure that, because that's not under your control. However, if your work is doing the assessment and after the assessment you are conducting some kind of some implementation and you are helping the organization to implement, now the things changes because now you are more in control of the organization implementing the recommendations. The second one here, for instance, okay, and maybe you are in a more indirect, still in an indirect way, but you are more in control of the organization if the organization improves their security. But that's about it. And that's escape SafeTag. It's because you are doing SafeTag, and after SafeTag, you are doing other thing. Okay. So yeah, in terms of formal content, this is it. However, at the over, there are a couple of other things I want to share with you. These are the post-audit activities. First, you prepare your audit. You decide the activities, you talk with the organization to understand them better. Then you go there or do it remotely, but you know the concept, no? Then you start conducting some initial activities. You probably want to facilitate a risk assessment exercise, a data assessment exercise, and then you go and into it. Like you start doing interviews. You start running tools and scanners to the resources. You start understanding what's going on at the technical level and at the human level as well. And probably some resources you might want to dive deeper and run more tools and or maybe run some more advanced checks, etc. And when you have all of that, then you will sit down, you will map all the vulnerabilities you found, and you will map all the recommendations that you might make to the organization. And the end result will be a beautiful report. Well, we are covering this in a couple of slides, but in the beginning, the results should be a beautiful report with everything they need to do to improve their security. However, also don't overlook the power of doing a debrief, something we saw in the last session. Before you go, like at the end of this process, when you are starting to work on this, you are telling the organization, you know what? If you want to start looking for the most present things, these are the things. Okay, this is the list of things that you might be addressing right now that will help you now, the low hanging fruit or whatever. Yes, while and they can be very entertained with that while you are building your report. Hopefully, not a huge report. So yes, and some of you, I believe, could be with us a couple of days ago, showing the results of an evaluation that we did under this project. Basically, we commissioned an internal evaluation just to run some interviews and surveys to auditors and to beneficiary organizations to understand how well SafeTech is working for them or not. So, um, I won't be diving or doing a lot of a very comprehensive presentation like we did on Tuesday for time reasons. So I'm going directly to tell you the main findings. First thing first, the audits are working. It's actually good after all these sessions and after all these hours of hearing this guy talk about audits. At least it's worth it because organizations believe they think that the awareness is increasing in the staff of the beneficiary organizations around their security, and for those who have IT departments or people, we are helping them. We are helping them to be heard. Uh, I thought it was just me and my experience in the organizations I have audited with IT departments, but apparently across the board, the feedback is the same. IT people said like, you know what? Before you did this audit, I was telling them to do a number of things and nobody was listening to me. And now I have somebody that can validate what I'm saying and try to push more advocate for these things that they want to push. However, there are other findings, interesting ones. Yes, audits are working, but it's very rare that we only do audits. First, almost in every single audit, there is a training at the beginning or at the end of the audit. In my case, it's always at the end. And it's interesting because formally speaking, SafeTech doesn't include training. However, the way the organization is seeing this process is like, well, what is what can you give us that can help us with all the knowledge that you have about the organization? How can we do something about it now? And how we can onboard all the team in the things we need to do. So it makes sense both for the organization and for the auditor to organize a training at the end. And these trainings are very, very good in terms of the the training is tailored, very, very tailored to the organization because you know all their secrets, you know all the processes, you know everything. So it's not the same to say, a strong password must include this, and this, than to say, you know what, the organization right now has this policy, and this policy worked well in the past, but now things have changed, and now there are new kinds of attacks, and now we are agreeing informally with management that we are changing this policy to this other thing, no? So you can adapt and localize that knowledge and that guidance into a very actionable thing for the organization. So, and that's happening a lot across the board, across all the regions in SafeTag audits. So if you are a trainer, you are in luck because you might have a space to organize something very nice for your beneficiaries when you are conducting a SafeTag audit. Some auditors, they are also not only doing the audit and the training, but also they're helping the organization to draft new policies. That's very tied to the example I just gave about the passwords. Same thing, but it may also include other things. Okay, and also IT support. Sometimes imagine you're doing an audit and you discover something awful, something terrible, and it's very easy to solve. You solve it. Probably you will want to tell the organization, you know what, I found this, and we are 5 minutes away to solve it. So why not do it? So that's also something that happens in these audits, and also there is a model where we have trainers, and they have been working for years with some organizations, and now they are doing an audit, and basically they will do it now or they will do it later because they work a lot with these organizations. So this IT support will be provided, so sometimes they are also including that formally when they are doing SafeTech or an assessment. And another finding from this evaluation is that SafeTech should be combined with other efforts. This is a hard one for me because I am not very informed about a lot of other tools that might be incorporated in SafeTech, but some of the things that emerged were psychosocial assessments, and for those that are very good facilitators and that are very familiar with all of the psychosocial stuff, physical security, like more in a more intentional way, and also trauma informed approaches that is very tied to the psychosocial part. I know SafeTech is very compatible with the holistic approach, and that is including both psychosocial and physical approaches. However, it doesn't seem very um, explicit or not explicit enough in the way SafeTag is drafted. Yes. Besides that, there are also negative impacts on by doing SafeTag audits, and this evaluation found. There might be some organizations that they feel overwhelmed because of knowing what is there are the problems. It's many times organizations they know, but they don't want to think about it. No, they know they are at high risk They know they might be suffering very awful things, but they don't want to think about that. That's one side of this. Another side of this is that some organizations might feel overwhelmed by all the things they need to do. They are okay with the risks because they assume that very well, whatever. But when you tell them, okay, now you can do things so you can minimize or mitigate these problems, and they see a very long list of things, they might also feel overwhelmed. So that's another thing. All of these list of negative things are exceptions. Okay, there's some people said like, well, you know what, I had one organization, two organizations with this problem. So also don't expect that this will happen every time. In some other cases, the organizations just are kind of annoyed by the audit process because they feel that it's more work. Now I need to do, I don't know, environmental journalism, and now I need to do this list of things about security. It's like it might be complicated for them. Sometimes the recommendations are not adapted to the organization capacity or infrastructure. That's some negative impacts. We have seen cases of this. Like we see the report, and in the report they are suggesting things that are impossible to for organization, like getting the equipment that is not available in the country, like getting services that are too expensive, like absurdly expensive for the budgets of these organizations. And it's impossible that they will do this, and some other examples. Um, these across the board in all regions, people are complaining that reports and presentations might take too long, sometimes months to arrive. So, as you may imagine, that huge report I just showed you took a lot of time to be built. And it was 70 something pages. It was very longer than that because I redacted the thing you saw is a redacted version. So I just removed a lot of information that will disclose the identity of the organization. So that took a lot of time to build, and that may be a problem because they might have some needs that they need to attend it like faster. And also, we, the auditors, we are scared to breaking things. Some tests, some scans are hard, and with the services that we're scanning, and sometimes we are scared of that as well. Um, yeah. Here things got super interesting in terms of the evaluation because the audited organizations, they were agreeing that interpersonal skills are the most important ones. Like we had auditors, they are very good with the tools, they know their thing with the mm, technology. However, it didn't work that well because they weren't very good facilitating, they weren't very good building trust with the organization. So we hide things from them, for instance, that's an example. And in general, because they didn't feel very comfortable, or the way the recommendations were sold wasn't that good. Okay, so uh, being a good facilitator is a very good way of being a good auditor, apparently. And also, this is important, and we are trying to disseminate this information with as many funders as we can, that local auditors are way more effective. Um, it will be way better than any of you are doing SafeTag in your countries than sending Carlos there to do the same thing. Because if they are sending me, I don't understand the context. I don't know what is dangerous and what's not in their country. Also, I don't know necessarily the ecosystem and the problems of the civil society community in those countries, as opposed to somebody like you that you're living in your local context, and you live in the civil society sphere. And also, that's very connected to the first point. Soft skills for audited organizations are more important than the auditing skills. They said that how the recommendations are presented is more valued than the actual methodology. Um, some organizations even threw some shade to the reports because they said that the reports were impersonal, and weren't very useful for them to understand the importance of doing things, as opposed to having a good debrief where the auditors was in the same room with the people in on the organization, and they agreed together, like, or they could facilitate their way to understand understanding the threats and also the recommendations. So that's also here in the findings, and mixed a little bit with recommendations. Again, the way I see it is the same way to say the same, a different way to say the same thing. The implementation has to do more about how the recommendations are presented than even the pertinence. Some organizations even did very difficult things and very unintuitive things because their auditor convinced them that that was important enough, and it worked the struggle or the problems, or the annoyance of implementing some of these recommendations. Some auditors talked about co-creating the recommendations. I found this fascinating. Like, once they had all the vulnerabilities, they could sit down with the organization and together uh, try to see the options, the different things that you might do to solve problems. And apparently, in these audits, the organization implemented a very high percentage of the recommendations because they were part of their creation. So they understood. Two, they adapted, and they make sure that the recommendations were something feasible for them. And co-creation of policy, same thing. Like, not only the recommendations, but the actual products. Like, you know what? Let's create together a password policy or a acceptable use policy for computers or phones, etc. In terms of duration, some people said, like, my audits are like 2 days long, and they are very short. Some even said that their audits were phone calls of 3 hours, eh, and they only cover very specific topics. And some others said, I'm more used to be honest, in my case, I'm very used to 4 or 5 days, complete days audits in person. However, there are other modalities to do this. And other people, they are starting to adopt a model where they are dedicating few hours a week to an organization so they can extend the duration of the audit 2 months, in 1 2 months or more. However, when we started during the evaluation, we asked people how long was your audit and how much could you implement during the recommendations, and there was a correlation there. The more effective audits were the ones during between 1 and 2 months. However, don't feel that you need to do these audits with this duration. Again, it's your style. You should decide how to do it, as long as you make it work. But just to have that information might be useful. And these many different people say the same thing, and to the point that, okay, this is a pattern. People said that the briefings, good briefings, plus training, plus quick wins. This is fixing small things that are low hanging fruit. The combination of these three things were way better than the report in terms of effectiveness. So that's another thing that is important to share with you. Yeah, I believe that that's all the material I have prepared for today. It's the last one, so you can be happy if you are kind of overwhelmed as well for all the information shared during the last weeks. I'm going to stop the recording.